I'm coming to love Star Trek with an absolute passion. But when Star Trek Discovery came along, I kind of became a proper fan.
The Doctor Who fallout has been incredible after this show has been subject to seemingly one of the most coordinated attack the fan campaigns of all time. Whether it be David Tennant telling the fans that they can just F off, the main character, Ncuti Gatwa, telling people, don't watch, turn off the TV, go and touch grass. He feels sad for those who don't watch the show because it's been perverted. It's fascinating that it matters so much to these people. I can understand why a Rwandan wouldn't see the importance of destroying British culture and heritage that goes back decades, long before he had anything to do with the nation.
Sheer f***ing hubris.
But maybe, just maybe, it means a little bit more to British people. You're going to limit yourselves from a show that you claim to love because you don't like someone. That's really sad for them. You're gonna stop yourselves consuming the thing that we're actively destroying so you don't consume our new slop? I'm so sorry you're gonna miss out on it. How will you ever cope without my mediocrity?
And if I have to explode the engines and rupture this world and damn us all to hell, then I will!
Then we get the very basic. The character is a shape-shifting alien. It can be anyone. No, it has to be a British man, because it's to do with British heritage. I know it's too complicated for you to understand. But the point is, there is only one representation of the character, a British man, and that is going to be quite limiting, because that's the point. To limit it to being part of British heritage. Instead, it's tricky, because this is a win for inclusion, which means the lowering of standards, but let's not stop there, let's lower them even further. This could have happened ages ago. We could have completely annihilated the show and lowered our standards before, but now, it warms my heart to know that we're lowering the standards. I love the responsibility. You need to keep your mind open, because I want to change your justified opinions. It is weird that he feels so sorry for those people when The Guardian came out and gone, even the haters will find it impossible to resist him. I can only assume they mean he's going to attack them down a dark alley or something, because otherwise, it's very easy to resist this show, as the ratings prove, coming in at 2.6 and 2.4 million. In fact, they were so desperate to scare off all of those viewers that even the villain of the second episode, some random numpty that just enters for a bit, decided that they too were going to jump on the train and start attacking people. Who gives an F what the bigots think? For every person who's just one of those ists or whatever that we don't really care about, you know, the normal people.
It just feels natural. This is the world.
That we lose. There's going to be 3 to 5 new fans that come in just for that representation, just to replace them. So those fans who are not fans anymore, I say, don't let the door hit you on the way out. The message was clear. We don't want you to watch. If you're British, if you're a Doctor Who fan, if you've been around for the decades as part of the culture, we don't want you anymore. This is a new place for new people. This is an invasion, a colonization, a perversion of what we used to be, and we like it that way. As after all, if they don't watch it, who needs them? And let's be honest, nothing says profitable mass appeal like that face. Rolls-Royce, if you ever need something to drape itself over a car just to sell extra models, well, I think I've got the eye candy for you.
Oh, no, I'm a Libra. I can't make decisions like this.
So, of course, we get the story in 2 pictures. All of you should turn off and go and touch grass. I'm so sad that you felt like you had to touch grass. Because obviously, we're going to make this show all about me, aren't we? I mean, you can't ignore my chocolatiness. And of course, even the press got involved. Doctor Who's newest villain might drive some viewers away. Good riddance. This actually got retweeted by Jinkx himself. And if anyone has a problem with me saying himself, I mean, well, we've got Davies in an interview who, well, it gets quite funny, actually.
By his invention, his genius, and their invention, their genius, so it's a very hard time defeating them.
But of course, the website itself decided to chicken out on that title, so we ended up with Jinkx Monsoon is right on time. It's quite the alternative to the original title. I think you'll agree. Yeah, you need to piss off. Oh, I mean, they're here just about. Either way, we decided to step it up a gear with the Metro. Sorry, normal men. Doctor Who was never made for you. This actually caused Metro at one point to delete their account, and they're back now. They deleted their account hoping that everything would die down, and then returned. I mean, it seems like a rather cheap tactic in order to avoid the UK's hate speech and anti-discrimination laws. But then again, when you hire what else are they going to write? It is interesting as well that this was the original title, and as you can see, they did update the article to change it to was never made just for you. Which, to be fair, is correct. It was also for the normal women and their normal children. A father, a mother, and 2.4 children were the target demographic for Doctor Who. That's why it's called a family show, because it's for families and the people who make up families. And the interesting part about a target demographic is it doesn't actually mean you exclude other people from watching, but they're also not included. They're not thought of. Nobody cares about them because they don't matter. They don't actually give you that much money. The only people that matter as a customer base is the bulk. The ones that keep you in business. The ones that make you a profit.
Some of those people are going to say for a
Tell
second.
it to the judge. The judge is the public.
Which for Doctor Who was the families. It was the normal men that existed throughout British history. Not that Azir Iftikhar would even understand that, because they were never part of that history. And so I can understand why they don't care when it's being destroyed. It's got nothing to do with you. And the people it did have anything to do with, well, I mean, they left. It doesn't appeal to them now. She is right that it's not made for them anymore. The problem is, they make up most of the country, just so we're aware. They're the main audience for the show, as it turns out, and without them, well, I mean, it just kind of fail, don't you? Turns out you need it to be made for them for it to be a success. But the funniest part about this entire tweet was actually one of the replies. They'll blame it on iPlayer, or something to do with the weather. This was said at 11:44 a.m. Because the thing is, Radio Times came out, and they did. Figures are also likely to have been affected by good weather in the UK. This was written at 11:37 a.m. That's 7 minutes before. So either Joey is a Radio Times addict, read the entire thing in 7 minutes, and then thought he'd come and make a joke out of it, or the more likely explanation, the corporate media is just ever so predictable. Much like the corporate press, because it was obvious they were going to give it 100%, which has now dropped down to 97. Probably one review came in. But the audience score obviously disagreed. Also having some incredibly low ratings contributing to it. You really would expect the reviews to be far more numerous by now. And yet apparently all of these people, they don't matter. Not according to Davis.
Twitter might kick off, and in dark little corners people might argue, but that's not the real world.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just here in my dark little corner in a place that isn't the real world, and yet, for some reason, Davis doesn't seem to grasp. Maybe that's just a description of him.
It doesn't even feel particularly queer to me. It just feels natural. This is the world.
Maybe it isn't everybody else. Maybe it isn't the almost entirety of the country. Maybe it's him and his little, incredibly minor niche, which is in its own little bubble.
It's 2024, and we're all embracing of this.
Because Davis has fallen into an obvious trap that this is just how I live. Everyone I surround myself is all like this. Even when it came to Maestro, it was somebody he already knew because his friend got married to him.
Broke down many barriers, and I'm never going to step back from that. And in fairness, no one's ever asked me to step back from that.
This isn't somebody who's surrounded by normal general culture. This is somebody who's in a bubble. Now, at least Ncuti Gatwa, he realised this when he said, it was interesting. As I say, I live in a very leftist, liberal bubble. And there's an episode where we really lean into that. And at no point did he think, maybe we shouldn't. Because to him, this is just how he lives. This is normal to him. So leaning into it just seems normal.
Simply right, quite naturally. I don't think about it that much. That is my world. And I'm trusted by my bosses to put my world and to put my writing on screen. So I confidently do.
Now, there is supposed to be some kind of restraining force on this. There's supposed to be the people with the finger on the pulse of the culture. The normal people that can point out, no, we're not doing that. No, that's too far. That's too weird. That's too eccentric. And yet, it's not like that anymore, because the BBC isn't like that. The BBC is itself Davis's bubble. And so you can't have a restraining influence when they just agree with you, because they're also in that same bubble.
It's 2024, and we're all embracing of this.
The industry talks a lot about identity.
Now, to be fair, Davis he's always been like this. Even when we go back to 2009, where some people were upset that he killed one of the characters, he told them to go and watch Supernatural. And when asked what he thought of the fan backlash, he went, it's not particularly a backlash. It's nothing, to be honest. Just a few people posting online. People often say fans have got their knives out, but nothing's happened. It's just a few people typing. If you can't handle the drama, don't watch it. Find something else. Go look at poetry. It's a bit like in gaming where someone trash talks you and just time to go and play Farmville. It's just in this case, maybe he needs to go and play Farmville. Because it's not the fans that have a problem with Doctor Who, it's him. He's the one that has such a problem with...
Broke down many barriers, and I'm never going to step back from that.
Normal people and Doctor Who, that he had to change them, that he had to eradicate them, that he had to cram it full of all of this stuff to try and morph it from what it was, what it's always been, what its history is.
Simply right, quite naturally. I don't think about it that much. That is my world.
I mean, if you're so triggered by British culture and heritage, have you ever considered pissing off to Farmville? So when he said things like they should simply grow up, do some research, and stop riding on a bandwagon that they actually don't know anything about, a lot of his earlier comments now seem to apply to him, as quality of television doesn't seem to be his priority anymore. Although Davis insists that he didn't set out to be revolutionary in casting the Doctor, those were exactly the type of barriers I like to break. I didn't set out to be revolutionary. This is just normal to me. I mean, it's very hard for anyone to stop me doing these things. You'd have to be pretty brave executive to say, don't go there to me. You shouldn't be going there. You don't have to be brave to say it. After all, what are you gonna do? Set Ncuti Gatwa on me?
Sheer hubris.
I'm sure there are people thinking that, but I wouldn't work with them, would I? If you're not gonna allow me to pervert the history of something, then I wouldn't work with you. Puts a little bit more in perspective everyone else's attitudes, doesn't it? With the various different people involved with the show. All felt so comfortable in just telling the audience that they shouldn't watch. It's because they have no one above them telling them they shouldn't. There is no normal person above him telling them they've gone too far. There is no restraint.
And I'm trusted by my bosses to put my world on screen, so I confidently do.
Like there may have been when Davis was here before on The Doctor. Yeah, they could have been going, no, you've gone too far. No, you can't do that. No, you've got to respect the audience. We still need their money. Now we don't have any of that. Now we're leaning into it. Now we think we're the ones in charge. Now we think we're normal.
I don't think about it that much. That is my world.
Now we're at a point where you'd have to be pretty brave to say no to me. Because after all, I'm the one with the power here. And who do you think you are to say no to me? So one of the reasons it's a bit surprising when you get a bit further down the article and you find industry veteran Julie Gardner from Bad Wolf Production Company, where Julie Gardner says, I want every person in the world to watch Doctor Who. Gardner says of the power of Disney Plus. We can just get bigger and get better reach, and it feels exactly where Doctor Who should be. Doctor Who should be going out across the world and being for everybody. Unless you disagree with David Tennant, or Ncuti Gatwa, or Jinkx. Should be for everybody. Disney Plus needs it to be for everybody. But all the people who work for the BBC, they don't have that same priority. The BBC is a government taxpayer-funded organisation. It actually doesn't care about its viewer base. Its viewing figures are irrelevant because it's not where the money comes from. Disney do care about viewing numbers. Disney Plus needs the money. It needs the subscription fees. And what you've got is a clash of two different business models. You've got one which is literally funded by the state and one which is funded by private money where it needs to make a profit, and therefore it's not a good idea to tell your customers to piss off. It was a huge mistake for Disney Plus to give private money to Davies, someone who comes from the BBC background, someone who thinks he's in such a position of power that you'd have to be pretty brave just to say no to him, someone who it's very hard to stop him doing anything, someone who wants to break barriers, which isn't a good idea for a family show.
Get her back here right now, so I can loofer her to death.
None of these things are profitable, and yet Disney tied themselves to a sinking man on a sinking ship. And I can only assume that back then, back when he first made it, he did have some kind of person restraining him. Maybe he's self-centered because he realized that actually society would have been the ones that would have been brave enough to tell him no. And maybe he realized that while this is my world behind closed doors, it's not suitable to do in the street. Or maybe there's just something about him which has been lost. Maybe a change of ideas or values has actually harmed his creativity. Not only are those the foundations that drive you to be creative, but they can also constrain you in what you're allowed to talk about or do, or what you think you should be doing. Whereas before, maybe you wanted to provide hope to people. Now, we need to educate them instead. That alone is enough to destroy your taste.
With battles to be fought and votes to be gained, it's like I'm not naive to the problems that exist.
But there's also, with his new ideology, something which happens where no longer are we thinking about a product from the quality perspective of the cast or the plot, what these people do or the emotions that make you feel. No, now the quality of the product is in the representation itself. That's why Jinkx here thinks people will just come and replace the old fans just because of representation. Look, I'm here. This tick box is in this show. That makes it good. People will watch just for that.
It's kind of raised the roof on Doctor Who slightly. It's allowed a madness and a freedom. I find that character more terrifying for the Doctor.
None of this is about what happens, how it's written, how it's performed. No. It's the fact that I am here. That is enough. Or as Davis says,
becoming one of everyone's favourites immediately because it's Titanic.
And it really doesn't seem like Davis has good taste in media anymore when he said this.
I'm coming to love Star Trek with an absolute passion. But when Star Trek Discovery came along, I kind of became a proper fan.
Because it wasn't just Discovery that he talks about, he actually talks about the other Star Treks as well.
Now I'm devoted with Picard and Strange New Worlds and...
Those are not good shows. They don't have good stories, but they do have great tick boxes in them. It's what a lot of the stories just revolve around.
The fact that I'm not married to Captain Pike is a major problem in my life. What a great name.
And it seems like this is how his tastes have changed now. It's literally, if it's in there, it must be good. It makes me feel something because I am like that. That is the world I recognize. And so he likes it because it gives him those emotions. No one else, though.
I don't think about it that much. That is my world.
It doesn't appeal to normal people. It doesn't appeal to the majority of people. It appeals to a very, very narrow niche within a niche. And even Gatwa seems to realize this. I'm aware that my experience is not the typical experience, and maybe that's why many of the fans actually share the same complaint, that the first episode was completely unnerving. Not entertaining, unnerving. But Doctor Who went from paternalistic to woke warrior. And that was the main problem. It used to be paternalistic, and now it's maternal. It used to be a masculine show with masculine values to a feminine cast with feminine morals. That doesn't make good heroes, nor does it actually appeal to most people. In Russell T Davies's hands, the Doctor has become hectoring and tiring. What went wrong? And that is the interesting part about the critics. Because remember, the critics gave it 100% for days, and now it's still at 97%. These are the same critics, and yet they're already turning on Doctor Who. Doctor Who Episode 3, spoiler-free review. Moffat's explosive return is a bit of a dud. Has come up with a concept that puts Gatwa's natural energy in a straitjacket, which, let's face it, and that's a good thing. We do have Davis's description of Episode 3 himself.
Comes right down to earth. Very tough, very gritty, very hard, much more hard sci-fi.
And I think they're right. That isn't Gatwa at all.
Doctor, what would that be?
Just the Doctor.
But it is the Doctor, and Gatwa just makes a terrible Doctor because he can't play the range that the Doctor requires. The only person he can play is Ncuti Gatwa.
I just got snowman, and I would like to go home.
Trusted by my bosses to put my world on screen, so I confidently do.
So of course it puts his energy in a straitjacket. He's incapable of doing anything else. And when he's required to actually do something serious and dark and gritty, he can't, because he's never experienced that. He's always been coddled and privileged. He's grown up as the special, unique snowflake. He doesn't have the life experience or the brain matter to pull off an incredibly intelligent character that has actually been through strife, struggle, and loss. He can't mimic it because he has no idea what any of those things feel like. This is a guy who can't even understand what talent is. He completely misjudges it, so he judges genius as mediocrity, all the while himself refusing to improve. Oh, you don't have to be excellent or even aspire to be excellent. No wonder somebody that can't even be excellent themselves thinks everyone else is mediocre. He looks up at the people better than him and gets envious, bitter, and jealous. Why can't I have what they have? How did they get there? I deserve to be in their place. This is the same attitude that drives the entire ideology in the first place. And his idea was, well, I don't have to be excellent or aspire. I've just decided that I need to be loved just for existing. I don't have to try. I don't have to better myself. I don't have to improve. I could just be mediocre or less than mediocre. How can a person that has lived such a privileged, untroubled life that they don't think they even need to earn anything, at the same time portray the most intelligent person in the universe, which has always struggled, always fought, always defeated the greatest dangers in the universe and lost so much, still wants to continue struggling? No wonder his energy is in a straitjacket. He's out of his depth.
Sheer f***ing hubris.
That's how episode 3 ended up with 2 stars, whereas they gave episode 1 and 2 3 stars. But of course, because 3 out of 5 is still above 50%, it does still get fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. The Disney budget is obvious, but so are Russell T Davies' messages. Because if you were going to get educated on the important things in the world, obviously the person you'd turn to is Russell T Davies, a guy whose main personality trait is that he's happy. I got up wondering if he's also fallen down Gatwa's plan, where he's like, okay, so I used to have to do good stuff, but now as society has changed and I just get uplifted just for existing, I don't have to try anymore. I can just trot out any old crap. They're not brave enough to say no to me. Do they not realize that my tick boxes give me power? Now, one of the interesting things is when Gatwa got asked about costume in one of his interviews.
Exploring subcultures of British fashion. Specific plot point, no.
And he talks about how there is no story reason for them to exist, but the costume designer wanted to go through all of these subcultures of British culture, and then we find out, actually, that's not really what they wanted to do.
Broke down many barriers, and I'm never going to step back from that.
There's a question about dancing in a club wearing a kilt. What inspired the look? He goes, well, this was on my initial mood board. I had kilts on there, and men in skirts. Russell told me it would be great if Ncuti could wear a skirt.
Broke down many barriers. That is my world.
I was like, well, how can we introduce that? Don't we think that's a little bit far? Do we wait a bit of time before we do that? Do we warm up the frog before we start boiling it? Because it's just such a big jump from former doctors. And then I saw this club scene and I was like, this is where we can have him in a kilt. We can warm them up with kilts. British people. They're used to kilts. And then we'll just jump into the skirts as if it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I tell you what, if you don't believe in the slippery slope, you have to wonder why you can't stop at any point. I actually don't think it's a slippery slope. I actually just think you have a cliff and then once you've jumped off it, that's it. You can't stop gravity. You are going to hit the ground. The actual only solution isn't to go, I want to stop halfway up. It's to roll everything back onto the top of the cliff and not jump off in the first place. Instead, pick a different direction. Because otherwise you get a flurry of irritable reviews of Davis's triumphantly expensive return. Talking about the show's crowbarred in references, with a barrage of political correctness being hurled at our kids. They used to put it in before, but now it's started to feel a little clunky. Maybe it's because now we're in power, we can just take the mask off and show you what we always wanted to show you. There's a rather interesting bit in Davis's interview where they're talking about this kind of stuff. Makes a strange comment.
It's a more welcoming world in schools. You know, we now have people who can come out in schools and be happy and thrive, which when I was that age was literally impossible.
That's not out of context. That is the context. First thing that came to his head when he was talking about it.
Twitter might kick off, and in dark little corners people might argue, but that's not the real world.
Isn't it amazing? People can do this in school now. And if you look at the first two episodes of The Doctor, they are, without doubt, aimed at tiny little children. It's tempting to think that Davis is looking for an outraged reaction. Well, I mean, with his casting choices and the bile that all of them spewed up at the fans, they definitely showed their disgust at the audience.
You are disgusting.
But I get the feel that this is just the BBC doing what the BBC does, along with its employees, and they thought, we don't need the British people.
With a mob of revolting peasants.
Don't need them. We actually despise them. We hate them. We really like it if they just leave. No, we've got America now. We've got Disney now. We've got a huge continent of 330 million people plus that will all watch our show. We don't need the British people anymore.
You are poor, so you will like this.
But then you have to think about when they looked at America, when the BBC saw the American continent, the American audience, what did they think would appeal the most to Americans? A Rwandan Ncuti Gatwa and Jinkx. I'm not sure how many Americans would be pleased to know that that is the international opinion of what Americans enjoy in entertainment. It's like, yes, they are absolutely destroying British heritage deliberately, but this is what they think you like. We know they absolutely hate and despise the British people, but they're actually trying to appeal to Americans. I think America is the new modern audience that they're aiming for. When Davis was asked about a streaming performance for 2023 Comeback, he railed against newspapers of absolute hate and venom and destruction and violence. You can't just throw around that word, especially when you're from London, where it actually exists in massive quantities. Who would rather see that sort of thing wiped off the screen and destroyed. Shame on you. Oh, here we go. Shame. Yes. There's a great thing about shame. Part of the 2 iron laws. You can't take the moral high ground when you don't have any morals, and you can't shame people who already see you as beneath them. To shame someone, they are required to respect you and respect your opinion. And if there's one thing we've learned over the last few years about you, Davis, no. The answer is no. Whenever the front pages get overexcited about the Doctor becoming a woman, real fans just sigh. The real fans. There's no true Scotsman. Real fans. If you complain about Doctor Who, you just haven't seen it or haven't watched it in a very long time. You've forgotten what the show was like. I do enjoy getting gaslit by the same people that hot coffee warning labels were invented for. Moffat said if he was a real person, you'd be terrified of him. He runs into a fight and decides who should win, espouses all the hippy-dippy crap, and basically says, you get one chance to do what I say, and then I exterminate your entire species. Because that's what I do. And some people would say that no one should have that power. I don't think it's really a problem as long as they're actually correct. Which is why, when the Doctor is so obviously wrong, it blows apart the entire story. Because once you have the wrong morals, you have the wrong motivations, and you come to the wrong conclusions. Like thinking that you should save a murderous psychopathic monster so it can be unleashed on an unsuspecting planet that you're invading. It's fine for the Doctor to have that as long as he's good and moral. But when the Doctor turns evil under Ncuti Gatwa, well then he's just doing horrific evil acts. To babies as well, which was doubly horrific. Recent episodes have hinted that the show is in danger of joining in the shouting and the screaming, and the crapping itself, then wondering why it stinks. Talking of people that crap all over themselves, welcome to the Metro. A vocal contingent of keyboard warriors, something Davies has called them, took to social media to complain about the show. It's already been torn apart by ideologues, but I'd argue it's always been like this. If someone's got a problem with that, they know where the door is. This is what it's all about. Stop watching, piss off. Stop watching, piss off. Stop watching, piss off. They think they don't need the British people because they despise the British people. Even the Metro said class commentary was placed front and centre because she lived on a council estate. The British working class. The backbone of the Doctor Who audience, which you now despise. You quote the same people as part of your argument, which you are now turning your back on so that you can drop a Cleveland steamer on them. And all of this while trying to maintain the moral high ground, when really, we saw the truth. You'd have to be brave to say no to me. There's a threat implied in that. There's an obvious knowledge of power behind that. I know I'm in the privileged position. I know you can't say no to me. So I can do whatever I want. I can demand whatever I want. And I'm doing it. It's just the world he couldn't quite do back then. Because back then people still wanted quality. They still wanted good storylines. They still wanted good characters. But now we've changed. Now people turn up just for the representation. That's the idea. That's the theory. And that's the reason for failure. Because in his own little tiny world, in his dark little corner full of mediocrity and the lack of aspiration, then representation is incredibly important. Inclusion, the lowering of standards is incredibly important. But to people that want to be entertained, that's where the quality needs to be there. That's where nobody really cares about you. That's where you're irrelevant. You could never make another show again and no one would care because you'd be replaced instantaneously. It may be the world you live in. It's just not the one that normal people care about. And it's normal people, which are the majority of people. That's why they're normal. That's what normal means. And the majority of an audience are the only people that matter. Because they're the bulk. They're the money. They're the success. And the success of Doctor Who was always based on families. A father, a mother, and 2.4 children. That was the target demographic. They were what the stories were aimed at. And it doesn't matter who existed on the margins or the peripheries or who you might be able to quote kind of existed for a bit somewhere. The majority of the content, the majority of the characters, the majority of the storylines were aimed at the majority of the audience. That's why it was a success. And now what have you got? A character that is so bizarre. Even Russell T Davies, in his interview, when he knows him personally, can't even work out how he should be talking about him.
By his invention, his genius, and their invention, their genius, so there's a very hard time defeating them. And
can you expect the majority of people in the world to be attracted to this bile, this hate, this disgust, this repulsive personality? If you think the fans will accept that, then I can understand why you crapped out the trash you did, because you really, really think the audience have low standards. Standards almost as low as you do. Unfortunately for you, though, the Disney money won't last forever, and when they see those viewing figures, oh boy, are they not going to be pleased. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe. More videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.